Hello everyone and welcome to my review of the Operation Persian Freedom campaign for the A-10C and the A-10C II in DCS World. So I've recently finished my playthrough of this campaign on the channel, and as normal I like to end these little series by letting you all know what I think, whether I'd recommend the campaign and so on, so let's jump in. So this campaign is the starting branch of this alternate history section that Ground Pounder Simulations put together, and you might remember them from the really amazing First in Weasels over Syria campaign that I covered previously on this channel. So this alternate history follows our own timeline up to the Iraq invasion, but then where this differs is the Arab Spring spreads to Iran, and Iran decide to respond to this by using chemical weapons on a series of their own rebel cities, killing 5,000 of their own people and causing the US to intervene. In this, you play as Steep, a RAF pilot who has been moved over to the USAF in order to use the A-10C or the A-10C II, depending on which one you pick. Both are fully implemented in this campaign, both work fine. And you'll be taking part in these operations as your side seeks to essentially move towards Iran and then topple the government, and finally deal with the outpouring of insurrection movements after that. Now I did play this with the A-10C II, it does work with the A-10C, but I've not actually tried it, so all of this review is going to be focusing on the A-10C II. Now first off, one thing that this campaign really gave me that I found that was missing in a lot of other campaigns is a real sense of progress. A lot of campaigns you can kind of get there, you see it in the briefing, you see that you are making progress, but very often you're fighting over the same area throughout the campaign. This one you really did see things change as the campaign goes on, as you are literally pushing north as you go. You start off trying to take some of the islands in the Persian Gulf, then push on to Iran proper, then start pushing further and further north into mainland Iran. You can really get the sense of scale of the operation and the change to the front line as you're slowly playing through this. It really works very well. And to back that up, the missions are definitely varied. The only mission that I'd say is a bit of a do-nothing mission is the first one, which is purely a training mission against static targets. I did actually enjoy that one. I found it really useful because it had been quite a while since I've been flying the Warthog, and it really did help me with a bit of a recap as to how to use all the systems, how to employ the various weapon types, and so on. For anyone who is very familiar and up to speed with the Warthog, that first mission might be a little bit on the boring side, but it does introduce the campaign's insistence on using correct IPs, which is something you're going to need to use throughout the campaign, so it's worthwhile doing even for that. And other than that first mission, all of the rest definitely have something to bring to the table. The difficulty ramps up quite quickly. Very quickly you'll find yourself in situations where you're low level against hidden manpower threats, but everything is a bit different. You're using different weapons, different conditions, and very different objectives. Sometimes you're going in after a well-planned objective to do more or less a strike mission. Other times you're on call for cast support as and when needed. And the highlight of the campaign for me was a kill box mission where you're essentially just given a zone, told to find any enemy in the area and deal with them as and well as you want to. So really interesting mix of missions. It's got a few night missions, not too many, enough to add some variety, but if you don't like the night missions, I found there weren't really that many to really annoy me. It was just the right amount to give a little bit of variation, a little bit of challenge without it becoming repetitive. Also, one thing that I appreciate is although we did end up using pretty much every weapon in the A-10's arsenal throughout the different points in the campaign, the weapon setup never felt forced or artificial. There are certainly some missions where you are taking off with very limited loadouts, either dumbfire bombs or just not many munitions. But this is well explained in context of the campaign. These are missions where you're essentially scrambling from a base that you weren't really supposed to be landing on, so it makes sense they didn't really have much. They've bolted on what they happen to have at the field. Makes perfect sense, doesn't break the immersion, really, really fun. Now, in terms of talking about variety, it is worth noting this is an A-10 campaign, so the missions are above all ground attack campaigns. There are a couple of air targets sprinkled in throughout the campaign. None of the missions are purely air-to-air, they're just a couple of optional objectives that do get you to test out your air-to-air skills, mostly against helicopters. So yeah, if you're wanting an air-to-air experience, well, you probably shouldn't be flying the A-10 in the first place. But from a ground-pounding point of view, there are a huge amount of variations with this, really, really fun. The scale of the missions are also really quite enjoyable. They're lovely, complex missions. There's a lot of interaction with the ground, with ground troops moving up and you having to defend them, having to scout along their path. It can be really, really enjoyable. And really good use of the JTAC system. It does not use the in-game JTAC, instead they're all pre-recorded voice JTACs. And these will be a mix of marked targets with smoke, or vague descriptions based on landmarks, or GPS coordinates. Really keeps things varied, keeps you on your toes, keeps you using different systems. Really appreciated. Never got bored throughout the campaign. In terms of difficulty, it does vary. Some of the missions are particularly harder than the others, and it's not always linear. Just a few missions scattered throughout are particularly hard, or at least were particularly hard for me. Either missions where you have extremely limited munitions compared to what you are expected to take on, or there are quite a few, particularly towards the end of the campaign, that force you down to a low level, normally with cloud cover. And so you're always putting yourself at risk, particularly against man-pads, which can be very, very nasty. Still, I got through all of the missions. Several of them did take a few tries, but nothing felt broken, nothing felt over the top. It was enough to be challenging without seeming unfair at any point. But certainly I would say this is maybe not a campaign for first-time players of the A-10. Something a bit more like Enemy Within does start you off a little bit slower, a little bit easier. This does have an easy kind of first mission and second mission, but then very quickly ramps up from there. So it is definitely on the challenging side of a campaign. In terms of replayability, I think this campaign is actually excellent for that. Does a really good system, as with First in Weasels over Syria, of giving you a pretty low target for the basic mission completion. Just basically complete the primary objective and you can go through to the next. But it's really quite challenging if you want to get 100% on a particular mission. Very often having to really plan your use of munitions, do everything perfectly, do everything promptly and accurately, and really hit all of your points on the correct time. Certainly a lot of campaigns have made me want to replay them immediately after finishing them. This campaign has really made me want to replay individual missions immediately after finishing them, for when I think, oh, I could have done that a bit better, or oh, I think I've got a better way of doing that. I think that's really quite impressive. Wants to make you jump right back in there, right back into see even doing a mission that you've just done. Really is quite a lot of fun in this campaign. Now, in terms of downsides to the campaign, the one thing that kind of irritated me a little bit was weirdly the gaps in the voice acting. The voice acting itself is excellent, absolute top tier in this campaign. All the voice actors are fantastic. I really got sucked in. I know some people didn't like the accents, but I found the accents absolutely fine throughout, the variety of British and American accents. A lot of emotion contributed throughout the campaign, some really strong story bits, including I think the only time that a DCS campaign has made me feel honestly guilty about something that's occurred. Really impressive. The weird thing is, though, that the individual voice spikes tend to come with a very notable delay between them. You may notice if you've been watching along, early on I was trying to cut out this delay because I found it annoying. Towards the end of the campaign I just gave up and left in those spikes and instead just made sure to have in a timestamp so you could skip it if you want to. But it just kind of broke the flow. You had really nicely voice-acted voice segments, and the timing was just off because they had, a 5 to 10 second pause between everybody's voice statements. Made it a little bit less believable, a little bit strange, and sort of broke you out of the immersion of it all. But that really is a very minor issue there. The other issue is there are a couple of minor bugs that I came across. Absolutely nothing game-breaking, mostly just, again, voice lines that weren't directed, and unfortunately the very last mission was a little bit messed up for me. There are a lot of moving parts on the last mission, so I didn't get any of the optional objectives given to me. And very disappointingly, the final epilogue didn't play because it was overridden by the DCS static that you sometimes get in low hill areas, which is just a bit unfortunate. I think something that's been added to DCS since the campaign just lessened that impact there. Otherwise, I'd say this is a really good campaign. I had an absolute blast with this. I enjoyed every mission. Some missions did take quite a lot to get through, but I definitely had fun going through them. Would definitely go through it again in my own time, and can definitely suggest this to people who want a really good, in-depth, detailed A10 campaign that really pushes the A10 to the limits of what it can do. Probably not a great campaign for first-time players. You might get a bit frustrated if this is your first A10 campaign. I'll suggest something a lot more like Enemy Within. Enemy Within, although does get challenging towards the end, it starts off a lot slower, a lot easier, eases you into everything. This kind of gives you a couple of warm-up missions and throws you in the deep end. One thing just to note, you do need the Persian Gulf for this mission, this campaign, and so that is an extra purchase there if you don't already have the Persian Gulf. The Persian Gulf is a really nice map, really suited for campaigns that use it well, but it's not my favourite map, so a little bit hesitant there. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I would certainly recommend experienced A10 pilots pick this up, and otherwise I hope you all enjoyed watching along with this. The series will be in the end card at the end if you've not followed along the series and you want to see more details. And otherwise, I hope to catch you all for the next campaign. Until then, remember to be kind to yourselves and everyone else. Cheers.